In the summer of 1980, I vanished near Mount Hood. For 93 days, hundreds searched the forest and never found me. Something else did, a Bigfoot. And what happened during those days is something I've spent my entire life trying to forget. My name is Larry Chapman, and I'm 57 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I work as a high school history teacher. But this story isn't about who I am now. It's about who I was in the summer of 1980, when I was 12 years old and everything I thought I knew about the world changed forever. It was July 1980. My dad, Robert Chapman, had just bought a 1978 Ford Bronco, tan with wood paneling on the sides, the kind you saw everywhere back then. He was so proud of that truck. My mom, Carol, had packed enough food for a week, even though we were only going camping for 4 days. My older sister, Jennifer, was 16 and spent the entire drive up to Mount Hood listening to her Walkman and ignoring everyone. I was in the back with our yellow lab, Rusty, who kept drooling on my shoulder. We were heading to a campground near Timothy Lake, about 60 miles southeast of Portland. Dad had gotten the location from a guy at his work, said it was remote, peaceful, perfect for getting away from the city. This was before cell phones, before GPS. We had a paper map spread across Mom's lap, and Dad kept asking her if we'd passed certain markers while she squinted at the tiny roads marked on it. The campground was everything Dad's coworker had promised. Isolated, surrounded by dense Douglas fir and hemlock forest. The kind of place where you could go hours without seeing another person. We set up our tent, a big canvas thing that smelled like mildew, and Dad got a fire going while Mom started dinner. That first night was perfect. We roasted hot dogs on sticks, made s'mores that got marshmallow and chocolate all over everything, and Dad told stories about when he was a kid camping with his own father. Jennifer even took out her earbuds for a while. Rusty curled up by the fire, and the stars above were so bright it looked like someone had spilled salt across the black sky. The next day, July 18th, changed everything. Dad wanted to take a day hike to a ridge about 3 miles from our campsite. He'd marked it on his topographical map, said the view was supposed to be incredible. Mom packed sandwiches and thermoses of lemonade, and we set out around 10 a.m. The hike was harder than Dad had expected. The trail was poorly marked, overgrown in places, and steeper than the map suggested. Jennifer complained the whole time. Rusty kept running ahead and then circling back, his tongue hanging out, happy as could be. Around 1 p.m. we stopped for lunch at a clearing about halfway to the ridge. That's when I made the mistake that would define the next 3 months of my life. I saw what looked like a really cool rock formation about 50 yards off the trail. Weird, smooth stones, stacked in a way that didn't look natural. I wanted to get a closer look, maybe take a rock home as a souvenir. "Stay with the group, Larry," Mom called out as I wandered toward the rocks. "I'm just going right there. I can still see you." Those were the last words I spoke to my mother for 93 days. The rocks were further than they looked. I climbed over a fallen log, pushed through some brush, and when I turned around to signal to my parents that I'd found something cool, I couldn't see them anymore. The forest had closed in behind me, thick and green and disorienting. "Mom? Dad?" No answer. Just the sound of wind in the trees and birds calling somewhere above. "Jennifer?" Still nothing. I wasn't worried yet. I just walked back the way I came. Except every direction, looked the same. Dense forest, ferns up to my waist, trees so tall I couldn't see their tops. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled until my throat hurt, started walking in what I thought was the right direction. The forest floor was uneven, covered in moss and fallen branches. I tripped twice, scraping my hands on bark. An hour passed, then 2. The sun was getting lower, shadows lengthening. I was 12 years old, alone in a wilderness I didn't understand, and the first real tendrils of panic were starting to wrap around my chest. I kept walking, kept calling out. My voice got hoarse. My legs hurt. And slowly, terribly, I began to understand that I was lost. really lost. By the time the sun set, I was stumbling through darkening forest, trying not to cry, trying to remember everything I'd ever heard about what to do if you got lost in the woods. Stay in one place. That's what they always said. But I'd already walked for hours. How would anyone find me now? I spent that first night curled up against a fallen log, shivering in my t-shirt and jeans. I had no jacket, no water, no food, just a Casio digital watch that read 8:47 p.m. when I last checked it, before the darkness became absolute. I didn't sleep. Every sound, every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves sounded like something coming for me. Bears, cougars, things I didn't have names for. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, I was exhausted, thirsty, and more scared than I'd ever been in my life. I spent that second day wandering, trying to find water. I remembered something from a nature show. Follow water downhill and you'll find civilization eventually, but finding water proved harder than I expected. The forest was dry, the summer having been particularly hot that year. Around mid-afternoon, I found a small creek. The water was cold and clear, and I drank until my stomach hurt. I sat by that creek for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Should I follow it? Should I stay there in case someone was looking for me? I followed it. Walked along the creek bed for what must have been 2 or 3 miles, my sneakers getting soaked until the creek disappeared underground, leaving me in dense forest again. That's when I realized I was being watched. It started as a feeling, that prickly sensation on the back of your neck, the awareness of eyes on you. I stopped walking and turned around, scanning the trees. Nothing, just forest. But the feeling didn't go away. I kept walking, faster now, that instinctive fear making my heart race. And then I heard it, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, low and resonant, somewhere between a hum and a growl, coming from deeper in the forest. I froze. "Hello?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Is someone there?" Silence, then movement. Something large moving through the undergrowth, about 30 yards to my left. I could hear branches breaking, but whatever it was moved with surprising quiet for its size. "I'm lost," I called out, my voice shaking. "I need help, please." The movement stopped, and then I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It was too tall, too broad, too impossible. A figure standing between 2 large fir trees, partially hidden in shadow, but unmistakably there. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black in the forest shade. The body structure was humanoid, 2 legs, 2 arms, broad shoulders, but the proportions were all wrong, too massive, too powerful, and it was staring at me. We stood like that for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Me, a scared 12-year-old boy, soaking wet and lost. And this thing, this creature that couldn't exist, watching me with dark eyes that reflected what little light filtered through the canopy. Then it did something that terrified me more than anything else could have. It took a step toward me, not aggressive, not threatening, just a single deliberate step in my direction. I ran, bolted through the forest without any sense of direction, branches whipping my face, my sneakers sliding on moss-covered rocks. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, and then I collapsed behind a massive stump, gasping for breath, waiting to hear the sound of that thing chasing me. But there was nothing, just silence, and that awful feeling of being watched that never quite went away. I stayed behind that stump until dark, too terrified to move. And when the night came again, my second night alone, I finally let myself cry. Not just from fear of being lost, but from the bone-deep terror of knowing that something impossible was out there in the darkness. Something that had seen me. And something that, I would soon learn, had decided to keep me alive. That night, exhausted beyond measure, I finally fell into a fitful sleep against the stump. When I woke up in the gray light of dawn on my 3rd day lost, there was food beside me, not human food. A pile of berries, huckleberries I'd later learn, sitting on a large flat leaf, and next to them, 3 thick roots that had been dug up from somewhere, dirt still clinging to them. Something, had left me food while I slept. And in the soft earth next to the stump, I saw them. Footprints. Massive human-shaped footprints, each one at least 18 inches long. I was 12 years old, lost in the Oregon wilderness, and a Bigfoot was keeping me alive. That's when I understood that the next question wasn't if I'd survive. It was whether I'd survive being saved by something that wasn't supposed to exist. I stared at those berries for a long time, my 12-year-old brain trying to process what this meant. Something had brought me food. Something with feet bigger than dinner plates. Something that had watched me sleep and decided, for whatever reason, not to hurt me. I was so hungry, I'd had nothing but creek water for 2 days. My stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside. But what if the berries were poisonous? What if this was some kind of... I didn't even know what. A trap? Did creatures like this set traps? Finally, hunger won. I picked up one berry and examined it. Dark purple, plump, looked like the wild berries Mom sometimes bought at the farmer's market. I put it in my mouth. Sweet, tart, real. I ate all of them, then tried one of the roots. It was tough and bitter, but edible. My stomach stopped hurting quite so bad, and then I heard it. That low, resonant sound from the day before. Closer this time. Maybe 20 yards away, hidden in the dense undergrowth, it was watching me eat. "Thank you," I said out loud, my voice cracking. "For the food. Thank you." The sound came again, softer, almost like acknowledgement, then silence. And that feeling of being watched gradually faded, though I knew it hadn't gone far. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. I'd wake up in the morning, usually cold, always scared, and there would be food. Sometimes berries, sometimes edible roots. Once a fish, already cleaned, sitting on a flat rock. The creature was hunting for me, foraging for me, keeping me alive. But it never let me see it clearly, just glimpses. A massive shape moving through the trees at dusk. A flash of dark fur across a clearing. And always, those enormous footprints in the soft earth. By the 5th day, I'd stopped trying to run away from it. Where would I run to? I was hopelessly lost. At least this thing, whatever it was feeding me. That was more than I could do for myself. I tried to keep track of time using my Casio watch, but the battery died on day 6. Without it, the days started blurring together. I marked them by scratching lines into a piece of bark with a sharp rock. 1 line for each day. By the time I made the 10th line, I was starting to lose hope that anyone would find me. The search parties came closer a few times. I heard helicopters overhead on day 7 and day 12. Both times, I tried to signal. Waved my arms, screamed until my throat was raw, tried to climb to higher ground where I might be visible. Both times, the creature stopped me. Not violently, it would just appear. Block my path. Make a sound that was unmistakably a warning. And I was still scared enough of it, still unsure enough of its intentions, that I'd back down. Looking back now, 45 years later, I understand why it did that. Helicopters, search parties, humans with guns and dogs. Those were threats to the creature. If I led them back to its territory, they might find it, might hurt it. So it kept me hidden, even from the people trying to save me. But at 12 years old, all I understood was that the thing keeping me alive was also keeping me captive. By the 3rd week, something shifted. The creature started getting closer. Not all the way close. It still kept a distance of at least 15 feet, but close enough that I could see it properly for the first time. It was a male, I think, though I had no way to be sure. 7.5 feet tall at least, maybe taller. Covered in coarse dark brown fur that was graying around the face, suggesting age. The face itself was flat and wide, somewhere between human and ape, but not quite either. The eyes were dark and intelligent. That was the word that kept coming to mind. Intelligent. This wasn't just an animal. There was thought behind those eyes. The arms were long, extending past where human arms would end, and the hands were massive. I'd seen those hands leave the food. They were remarkably human-like. 5 fingers, opposable thumbs, just scaled up to match the creature's size. It moved with a strange grace for something so large. Silent, despite the forest floor being covered in twigs and leaves that crackled under my every step. It knew this forest in a way I couldn't comprehend. One afternoon during that 3rd week, I'd marked 21 days on my bark calendar. The creature did something that changed our dynamic entirely. I was sitting by a stream trying to clean mud off my sneakers. My clothes were filthy by then, torn in places from branches. My jeans were more brown than blue. I probably smelled terrible, though after 3 weeks in the woods, I'd stopped noticing my own smell. I heard the creature approaching. By then, I'd learned to recognize the subtle signs, a particular quality to the silence, a sense of presence. I looked up, and there it was, standing about 20 feet away on the opposite bank of the stream. We stared at each other. This was the closest we'd been, the clearest I'd seen it. In the afternoon sunlight filtering through the trees, I could see details. The fur wasn't uniformly brown. There were hints of red, patches of gray. One ear looked damaged, like something had torn it years ago. This was an old creature, a survivor. And then it did something that made my breath catch. It sat down, just sat, cross-legged like a person sitting down to have a conversation. It placed its massive hands on its knees and looked at me. Not threatening, not aggressive, just looking. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was 3 weeks of isolation. Maybe it was the realization that this creature could have hurt me 100 times over and hadn't. Maybe I was just a 12-year-old kid who was tired of being scared. I sat down too, mirrored its posture. And we sat there, across the stream from each other, for what must have been 20 minutes. It was the strangest thing I'd ever experienced. No words, no communication I could understand, just 2 beings existing in the same space. And slowly, gradually, the fear that had been my constant companion started to ease just a little bit. When the creature finally stood and walked away, moving deeper into the forest, something had changed. It wasn't a pet or a friend. I was never foolish enough to think that. But it wasn't a monster either. It was something else. Something I didn't have words for at 12 and still struggle to articulate now. The days continued to blur, 30 lines on my bark calendar, then 40. The summer heat of July gave way to the slightly cooler temperatures of August. My sneakers were falling apart. My t-shirt had holes in it. I'd lost weight. I could feel my ribs easily through my skin. But I was alive, and I was surviving because something impossible had decided to keep me that way. The creature brought me food every day. Sometimes it would sit across from me at the stream, and we'd share that strange, silent companionship. Other times it would just leave the food and disappear for days, though I always knew it was watching from somewhere. I tried talking to it sometimes, told it about my family, my school, my dog Rusty. I don't think it understood the words, but maybe it understood the tone, the need to hear a human voice, even if it was just my own. My mom makes really good spaghetti, I told it one evening during week 6. It was sitting on its usual spot across the stream. With garlic bread. I really miss garlic bread. Do you have food you miss? Do you have memories like that? It tilted its head slightly when I talked, like a dog trying to understand. Then it made a sound, not the low hum or the warning growl, but something different, softer, almost conversational. I wish you could tell me things, I said, like how old you are, or if you're alone out here. Are you alone? You seem alone. The creature looked at me for a long moment, then stood and walked away into the darkening forest. And I was alone again, with just the sound of the stream and the crickets starting their evening song. By week 8, I'd stopped marking days. The bark was covered with scratches, 56 of them, I think, though I'd lost track. It didn't matter anymore. Days were just times when it was light, nights were times when it was dark, and in between, there was the constant struggle to survive. I'd learned which plants I could eat, which streams had the cleanest water, how to find shelter when the occasional rain came. The creature had taught me without words, showing me by example or by leaving specific foods that I learned to recognize and find on my own. I was becoming feral, wild. My hair was long and tangled, my fingernails broken and dirty. I'd stopped thinking about rescue, stopped jumping at every distant sound, hoping it was a helicopter. I just existed day to day in a strange partnership with something that defied explanation. And then, in what must have been early September, about 11 weeks after I'd gotten lost, everything changed. I woke up one morning and there was no food waiting for me. That had never happened before, not once in all the weeks the creature had been caring for me. I waited by the stream. The creature didn't come. I called out, feeling foolish but desperate. "Hey, where are you? I'm hungry." Nothing. Just the forest sounds, birds, wind, the stream babbling over rocks. I spent that entire day waiting. Nothing. By evening, the fear was back, sharp and cold in my chest. Had something happened to it? Had it gotten hurt? Or had it simply decided I was no longer its responsibility? I curled up in my usual sleeping spot, a small depression between two large roots of an ancient fir tree, and tried not to panic. The next morning, still no food, no sign of the creature. I was on my own. I tried to find food myself, but I wasn't good at it. The berries I picked made me sick. The roots I dug up were bitter and hard. By the third day, I was weak and dizzy, stumbling through the forest, calling out for the creature that had kept me alive. "Please, where are you? I need help." On the fourth day of its absence, I collapsed. Just sat down against a tree and couldn't make myself get up. I was so tired, so hungry, so completely alone. That's when I heard it, not the creature, something else. Voices, human voices. Covering Quadrant 7, 3 months now, not much hope. I tried to scream, but my throat was too dry. Tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. The voices were getting closer. I could see movement through the trees, people in orange vests, search and rescue. And then I saw something else, a massive shape far back in the trees, watching. The creature. It had been there all along, waiting, watching. As the rescue team got closer, the creature turned and disappeared into the forest. And somehow, I knew, it had led them to me. Deliberately. Its absence, the weakness that had left me immobile, it had all been calculated. The creature had brought the searchers to me in the only way it could without revealing itself. "Over here!" One of the rescue team had spotted me. "We found him! We found the boy!" People rushed toward me, questions flying, hands checking my pulse, someone wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. But I was looking at the forest, at the spot where I'd last seen the creature. "Thank you," I whispered, knowing it couldn't hear me, knowing it was already gone. They airlifted me out that afternoon, 3 months in the wilderness, 93 days, and I was alive because something impossible had decided to keep me that way. The hard part, the part that would shock everyone, came when they asked me how I'd survived, and I had to decide whether to tell them the truth. The helicopter ride was overwhelming. Noise, movement, strangers asking questions I could barely process. A paramedic, a woman with kind eyes and short blonde hair, kept checking my vital signs and telling me I was going to be okay. "You're one tough kid," she said over the roar of the helicopter blades. 93 days. That's incredible. How did you survive out there?" I looked at her, my mouth dry, my mind racing. How did I answer that? What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound insane? "I found berries," I said finally, "and water. I survived." She smiled and squeezed my shoulder. "Well, you did an amazing job. Your parents are going to be so relieved. They never gave up looking for you." They flew me to Emmanuel Hospital in Portland. I remember the fluorescent lights being painfully bright after months of forest shade. Doctors and nurses everywhere, poking and prodding, taking my temperature, checking for injuries. I was dehydrated, malnourished, covered in scratches and insect bites, but alive, miraculously alive. My parents arrived within an hour. I heard my mom before I saw her, a sound somewhere between a scream and a sob as she rushed down the hospital corridor. Then she was there, grabbing me, holding me so tight I could barely breathe, crying into my filthy, tangled hair. "Larry!" Oh God, Larry, my baby. My baby? Dad was right behind her, his face wet with tears, which shocked me because I'd never seen my father cry. Jennifer stood in the doorway looking pale and stunned, like she couldn't quite believe I was real. We thought... Mom couldn't finish the sentence, just held me tighter. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. Physically, I was in better shape than anyone expected. Thin, yes. Weak, definitely. But no serious injuries, no infections, no lasting damage that they could find. The doctors called it a miracle, said I must have had incredible survival instincts for a 12-year-old. The media found out almost immediately. By the second day, there were news vans outside the hospital, reporters wanting to know about the boy who survived 3 months in the Oregon wilderness. How had I done it? What had I eaten? Where had I stayed? A police officer came to interview me. Detective Morrison, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a gray mustache and tired eyes. He sat beside my hospital bed with a notepad, ready to write down everything I said. "Larry, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Start from when you got separated from your family." I told him about wandering away to look at the rocks, getting lost, trying to find my way back, spending the first night alone. All of that was true. And then what? How did you survive for 3 months? This was it. The moment of decision: tell the truth and sound completely insane, or lie and keep the secret of the creature that had saved my life. "I found a stream," I said carefully, "with fish. And there were berries, huckleberries, I think. I ate what I could find." For 3 months? A 12-year-old boy with no survival training just lived off the land for 3 months? "Yes, sir." Detective Morrison looked skeptical. "Did you see anyone else out there? Other hikers, campers? Anyone who might have helped you?" I thought about the creature, about its massive shape across the stream, about the food that appeared every morning, about those intelligent eyes watching me. "No, sir. I was alone the whole time." "How did the search team find you? You'd moved quite far from where you originally went missing. Did you deliberately try to find your way to where they were searching?" I hesitated. This was harder to explain. I don't know. I just kept moving, trying to find a way out. I guess I got lucky. The detective wrote something in his notepad. "You got very lucky. Most people don't survive that long, especially not kids." After he left, my mom sat beside my bed holding my hand. "I don't care how you survived," she said quietly. "I don't care if you ate bugs and tree bark and drank mud puddles. You're alive. That's all that matters." But I could tell she was wondering. They were all wondering. How does a 12-year-old boy survive 93 days alone in the wilderness? They released me from the hospital on September 15, 1980. The house felt strange, too warm, too bright, too full of sounds. The television, the refrigerator humming, cars driving by outside. After 3 months of forest silence broken only by wind and water and birdsong, civilization was overwhelming. That first night home, I couldn't sleep in my bed. Too soft, too enclosed. I ended up on the floor with just a blanket, and even that felt wrong. Mom found me there in the morning and didn't say anything, just squeezed my shoulder and told me breakfast was ready. School started 2 weeks later. I'd missed the entire summer and the first 2 weeks of 7th grade. The principal said I could take extra time if I needed it, but I wanted to go back, wanted something normal. That was a mistake, Everyone stared. Everyone whispered. I was the kid who had survived 3 months in the wilderness. Some kids thought I was cool. Others thought I was weird. The teachers didn't know how to act around me. Too sympathetic, too careful, like I might break at any moment. And everyone had questions, constant questions. What did you eat? Weren't you scared? Did you see any bears? How did you stay warm? I gave the same vague answers I'd given everyone else. Found berries, drank from streams, just survived. But the questions kept coming, and the lies started piling up, and I could feel the weight of the secret getting heavier. 3 weeks after I got back, a reporter from the Oregonian newspaper came to our house. Mom didn't want to let him in, but Dad thought it might be good to tell my story, get it out there once and for all so people would stop asking. His name was David Russell, young guy, probably late 20s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook covered in shorthand. He set up a tape recorder on our coffee table, one of those bulky cassette recorders that were common in 1980, and asked me to tell him everything. I told him the same story I'd told everyone else. Got lost. Survived on berries and stream water. Found by search and rescue after 3 months. He listened, took notes, asked follow-up questions. That's an incredible story of survival, he said when I finished. But Larry, I have to ask. The search and rescue team said you were in remarkably good condition for someone who had been living rough for 3 months. You were thin, yes, but not as malnourished as they expected. You had scratches and insect bites, but no serious injuries. And you were found almost 20 miles from where you originally went missing. How do you explain that? I walked a lot, tried to find my way out. But you survived for 3 months, alone, at 12 years old. He leaned forward. Larry, did someone help you out there? Maybe a hermit or another camper? Someone who didn't want to come forward for some reason? The question hung in the air. This was my chance. Tell the truth. Explain what really happened. Let the world know that something impossible existed in those mountains. I looked at my parents. Mom's face was tight with worry. Dad looked exhausted. 3 months of searching had aged him. Jennifer was sitting on the stairs listening, but trying to look like she wasn't. I started and saw Mom's eyes widen. There was someone. Who? Russell's pen was poised over his notebook. Something, not a person, something else. Dad's expression darkened. Larry, it was big, really big, like 7 or 8 feet tall, covered in brown fur. It brought me food every day, kept me alive. The silence in the room was deafening. Russell stared at me. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad stood up, his face red. Larry, that's enough, Dad said sharply. This interview is over. Mr. Chapman, let him finish, Russell said, his eyes bright with interest. Larry, are you saying a Bigfoot kept you alive? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Jesus Christ, Dad muttered. He's been through trauma. He's confused. The interview is over. You need to leave. Russell stood up slowly, gathering his tape recorder and notebook. Mr. Chapman, Mrs. Chapman, I understand this is difficult, but if your son is telling the truth, he's not telling the truth. Dad's voice was louder than I'd ever heard it. He's a 12-year-old kid who got lost in the woods and probably hallucinated from hunger and fear. There is no such thing as Bigfoot. Now, get out of my house. Russell left, but the damage was done. I could see it in my parents' faces. Fear, worry, the beginning of doubt about whether I was okay mentally. Larry, honey, Mom said carefully after Russell was gone, you know Bigfoot isn't real, right? It's just stories, legends. It was real, Mom. I saw it. It fed me. It kept me alive. You were alone for a long time, Dad said, trying to sound reasonable. Your mind probably created something to help you cope. That's normal. That's what brains do when they're under extreme stress. I'm not making it up. We're not saying you are, Mom said quickly. We're saying you might have misinterpreted what you saw. Maybe it was a bear standing on its hind legs, or a large man who lived in the woods. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man. It was a Bigfoot. Jennifer came down the stairs. "You sound insane, Larry. Like actually insane. No one's going to believe you." She was right, of course. The article came out a week later. David Russell had written it, but carefully. He presented my story about surviving on berries and stream water, and then, in the last paragraph, mentioned that I claimed to have been helped by a large, ape-like creature, but noted that doctors attributed this to trauma-induced hallucinations. The response was immediate and brutal. Kids at school started calling me Bigfoot Boy. Some laughed. Others avoided me entirely, like my insanity might be contagious. Teachers looked at me with pity. My parents started talking in hushed voices about seeing someone, a therapist. "I don't need a therapist," I insisted. "I need people to believe me." "We do believe you," Mom said, though her eyes said otherwise. "We believe you experienced something. But Larry, you have to understand how this sounds." I understood. I understood perfectly. I'd survived the impossible, been saved by the impossible, and now everyone thought I was crazy. 2 months after I got back, Dr. Patricia Hammond came to our house. She was a child psychologist, soft-spoken and patient, with gentle questions about my time in the woods. "Tell me about what you saw, Larry, this creature." "It was a Bigfoot." "Okay, and what did it do?" "It brought me food, watched over me, kept me safe." "Did it talk to you?" "No. It made sounds but not words." "And you weren't scared of it?" "At first, yes, but then it was just there, every day, helping me." Dr. Hammond made notes. "Larry, when we're in stressful situations, especially for long periods, our brains sometimes create companions to help us feel less alone. It's called, 'It wasn't in my head, it was real.' I'm not saying it wasn't real to you. No, it was real. Actually real. It left footprints. It brought me fish. It sat across from me at the stream." The sessions continued for weeks. Dr. Hammond was kind, but she clearly believed I'd experienced some kind of trauma-induced delusion. My parents listened to her reports and worried. Jennifer told her friends her little brother had gone crazy in the woods. And I started to doubt myself. Not about what happened, I knew what I'd seen, but about whether I should have told anyone. The creature had saved my life, and in trying to tell its story, I'd made myself into a joke. December 1980. Christmas was coming, but the house felt tense. My parents kept watching me like I might crack. Jennifer avoided talking to me. The kids at school had moved on to other gossip, but I was still that weird kid who thinks he saw Bigfoot. One night, I lay in bed. I'd finally gotten used to sleeping in a bed again and thought about the creature, about those intelligent eyes, about the way it had tilted its head when I talked, about the final glimpse I'd had of it before the rescue team found me. It had saved me. And in return, I'd exposed its existence to the world. Sure, no one believed me. But I'd broken the silence. I'd told the secret, and I didn't know if that had been the right thing to do. What happened next would shock me more than anything that had happened in those 3 months in the wilderness, because telling the truth had consequences I never could have imagined. And those consequences were just beginning. January 1981. 3 months since I'd been found. 4 months since I'd last seen the creature. I'd stopped talking about it, stopped insisting it was real. Easier to let everyone think I'd accepted their explanation, trauma, hallucinations, stress-induced delusions. But I hadn't forgotten. Every night I'd lie in bed and remember. The way it moved through the forest, the intelligence in its eyes, the gentleness with which it had left food for a scared, lost boy. School was still difficult, but the attention had faded. I was just Larry Chapman again, the quiet kid who sat in the back of class and didn't talk much. My grades were decent. I had a few friends, not many, but enough. Life was moving forward, and then everything changed. It was a Friday evening, January 23rd. I remember the date because it was Dad's birthday, and Mom had made his favorite dinner, pot roast, with potatoes and carrots. Jennifer had even come down from her room without being called twice, which was unusual. We were halfway through dinner when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Dad said, setting down his fork. He came back a moment later, looking confused. "Larry, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Dr. Marcus Webb." A man stepped into our dining room, behind Dad. He was maybe 60 years old with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a thick wool coat and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like a professor, which made sense when he introduced himself. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, professor of anthropology at Portland State University. I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I need to speak with Larry. It's quite urgent." Mom stood up, immediately protective. "What's this about?" "It's about what Larry experienced in the woods, what he said he saw." Dad's face hardened. "We've moved past that. Larry's been through enough. He doesn't need people encouraging his accurate observation of an unknown primate species," Dr. Webb finished. "Mr. Chapman, I've been studying reports of Sasquatch sightings for 30 years. I've interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and your son's account is the most detailed, most credible description I've ever heard from someone who spent extended time in proximity to one of these creatures." "You can't be serious," Dad said. "You're a professor. You actually believe in Bigfoot?" "I believe in evidence, and I believe your son is telling the truth." Dr. Webb turned to me. "Larry, would you be willing to talk with me? I have some things I'd like to show you." Mom and Dad exchanged looks. Jennifer was watching from her chair, her expression caught between skepticism and curiosity. "I don't think that's a good idea," Mom said. "Larry's therapist says he needs to—" "With all respect to his therapist, Dr. Webb interrupted gently. "She's trying to help him process trauma by convincing him what he experienced wasn't real. I'm offering to validate his experience. There's a significant difference." 10 minutes, Dad said finally. "You have 10 minutes." Dr. Webb opened his briefcase at our dining room table and pulled out several photographs. Large, glossy prints that looked professionally developed. These were taken 3 weeks ago by a hiking group in the Mount Hood National Forest. "About 15 miles from where you were found, Larry." He laid out the first photograph. It showed a clearing in the forest, and in the soft earth, a series of massive footprints. Each one was at least 18 inches long, with clear toe impressions. My hands started shaking. I knew those prints. I'd seen them dozens of times beside my sleeping spots, near the stream, everywhere the creature had walked near me. "Those are fake," Dad said immediately. "People make fake Bigfoot prints all the time." "These aren't fake," Dr. Webb said calmly. "I examined the impression sites personally. The depth and pressure patterns are consistent with an extremely heavy bipedal creature. The dermal ridges, the skin patterns, are visible under magnification and show anatomical details that would be nearly impossible to fake." He laid out another photograph. This one showed something caught on film at a distance, a large, dark shape between trees. Blurry, indistinct, but unmistakably massive and upright. This was captured on camera by one of the hikers. They heard sounds, vocalizations they described as unlike any animal they'd ever heard. When they investigated, they saw this figure and took several shots before it disappeared into the forest. My heart was pounding. "That's it," I said quietly. "That's what I saw." "Larry," Mom started. "No, Mom, that's exactly what it looked like. The size, the way it stands, everything." Dr. Webb pulled out a tape recorder, similar to the one the newspaper reporter had used, but smaller, more professional looking. "I'd like to play you something. A recording made by researchers in the Cascade Range in 1978. Tell me if you recognize the sound." He pressed play, static, then forest sounds, wind, birds, and then a vocalization, low, resonant, that distinctive hum growl that had both terrified and comforted me during those 3 months. "That's it," I said immediately. "That's the sound it made." Jennifer leaned forward. "That's actually creepy." "Your 10 minutes are up," Dad said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Mr. Chapman, Mrs. Chapman, I understand your skepticism. I understand you want to protect your son. But what if he's telling the truth? What if he spent 3 months in the care of a creature we don't fully understand? That's not delusion. That's an extraordinary experience that deserves serious study. Study? Mom's voice rose. You want to study my son like he's some kind of experiment? I want to document his experience. With your permission, I'd like to interview him in depth, record everything he remembers, and possibly take him back to the area where he was found to see if he can identify specific locations where he encountered the creature. Absolutely not, Dad said. He's not going back into those woods. I'll go, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. I want to go. I want to prove I'm not crazy. You're not crazy, sweetie, Mom said quickly. No one thinks... Yes, they do. Everyone thinks I made it up or imagined it. But I didn't. And if Dr. Webb can help prove that, I want to help. The argument that followed lasted an hour. Dad was adamantly opposed. Mom was torn between protecting me and wanting to believe me. Jennifer, surprisingly, took my side. Let him go, she said. If there's even a chance he's telling the truth, don't you want to know? Don't you want him to stop being treated like he's mentally ill? Finally, reluctantly, Dad agreed, but with conditions. He would come along. We'd go during daylight only. We'd stay with the search party at all times. And if I showed any signs of distress, we'd leave immediately. Dr. Webb agreed to everything. 2 weeks later, on a cold Saturday in February, we drove back to Mount Hood. Me, Dad, Dr. Webb, and 2 of his research assistants, a graduate student named Tom and a photographer named Sarah. Mom had refused to come, said she couldn't bear to see those woods again. The drive was silent. Dad's hands were tight on the steering wheel of the Bronco. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change from city to suburbs to forest, and felt a mix of excitement and dread building in my chest. We met the rest of Dr. Webb's team at a ranger station, 3 more researchers with equipment, cameras, audio recording gear. They all treated me with respect, like what I'd experienced mattered, like I was credible. It was a strange, almost overwhelming feeling after months of being dismissed. Larry, I want you to lead us as close as you can to where you spent the most time, Dr. Webb said, where you remember seeing the creature most frequently. Can you do that? I looked at the forest stretching out before us. 4 months had passed since I'd been in there. 4 months of rain and wind and changing seasons. Could I even find my way back? I think so. There was a stream and a big fir tree with a space between the roots where I slept sometimes. We hiked for 3 hours. The forest looked different in winter, less green, more brown and gray, the undergrowth thinner. But slowly, features started looking familiar. A particular rock formation, a fallen log covered in moss, the way the terrain sloped. This way, I said, leading them down a ravine. The stream is close. I can hear it. And there it was. The stream where I'd sat so many times, where the creature had sat across from me, just watching, just being present. This is it, I said. This is where we spent time together. Dr. Webb's team spread out, photographing everything, taking measurements. Sarah, the photographer, was documenting every angle. Tom was setting up audio equipment, hoping to catch any unusual sounds. Dad stayed close to me, his face unreadable. You really were here, he said quietly, for 3 months. Yeah. I can't imagine. Larry, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. You were trying to protect me, I get it. We spent 4 hours in that area. I showed them where I'd slept. The depression between the roots was still there, filled with old leaves now. Showed them where the creature used to leave food. Showed them the exact spot across the stream where it would sit. And then Tom, the graduate student, called out, "Dr. Webb, over here!" We rushed over. Tom was crouched by a large cedar tree about 50 yards from the stream, pointing at something on the ground. Footprints, partially obscured by fallen leaves and recent rain, but unmistakable, massive human-shaped prints, each one at least 18 inches long. Jesus, Dad breathed. Dr. Webb knelt down, carefully brushing away debris. These are recent, within the last week I'd estimate, and they're consistent with the prints we found last month. Sarah was snapping photographs frantically. The other researchers were taking plaster casts, measurements, samples of the soil. "It's still here," I said, my voice shaking. "After all this time, it's still here." "Or it comes through here regularly," Dr. Webb said. "This might be part of its territory." We followed the tracks. They led deeper into the forest, up a steep slope covered in ferns and moss. The researchers were excited, talking rapidly about stride length and weight distribution. Dad looked stunned, like his entire worldview was being rewritten. The tracks led to a rocky outcropping, and there, tucked under an overhang, we found something that made everyone fall silent. A shelter, not elaborate, just a space where someone or something had clearly been resting. The ground was compressed, shaped by a large body. There were bones nearby, deer probably long since picked clean. And there, arranged in a careful pile, were stones, smooth river stones, stacked deliberately. "It's been coming back here," I whispered. "This is where it lives, or part of where it lives." Dr. Webb was examining everything with intense focus. "This is incredible. The tool use, the deliberate arrangement of materials. This suggests a level of intelligence far beyond what we—" A sound cut him off. That sound. The low, resonant vocalization I hadn't heard in 4 months. Coming from somewhere uphill, deeper in the forest. Everyone froze. Sarah's camera clicked once, then silence. "Is that—" Tom started. "That's it," I said. "That's the creature." The vocalization came again, louder, closer. "We should go," Dad said, his voice tight. "Right now." "Wait," Dr. Webb said. "This is an incredible opportunity. We're leaving, now." Dad grabbed my arm, already pulling me back down the slope. The research team hesitated, torn between scientific opportunity and sense of self-preservation. The vocalization came a third time, and that decided it. We ran. Not panicked. Dr. Webb kept insisting we move in an orderly fashion, but fast. Down the slope, back to the stream, retracing our path to where we'd left the vehicles. Behind us, I could hear movement in the forest, heavy, deliberate, following us, not chasing. The creature could have caught us easily if it wanted to, but tracking, making sure we left. When we finally reached the ranger station parking lot, everyone was breathing hard. Dad's face was pale. The researchers were talking over each other, excited despite the fear. "Did you get it on audio?" Dr. Webb was asking Tom. "I think so. I had the recorder running the whole time. And the photographs, the plaster casts. Got everything before we left." Dr. Webb turned to me, his eyes bright, with something between excitement and awe. "Larry, you understand what this means? What we found today validates everything you said. The tracks, the shelter, the vocalization. You weren't hallucinating. You weren't confused. A creature kept you alive for 3 months. An unknown primate species that demonstrates tool use, intelligence, and, from your account, something close to empathy." Dad was quiet during the drive home. Finally, about halfway back to Portland, he spoke. "I owe you an apology. A big one. I didn't believe you. I thought you were confused or making things up or I don't know. But I was wrong. It's okay, Dad." "No, it's not. You told the truth and I called you a liar. That's not okay." When we got home, Mom was waiting anxiously. Dad told her everything, the tracks, the shelter, the vocalization. Her face went through a series of expressions. Disbelief, shock, fear, and finally, acceptance. "So it was real," she said quietly. "All of it." "Yeah, Mom, it was real." Jennifer came downstairs, took one look at our faces and said, "What happened?" "Turns out your brother's not crazy," Dad said. "He was telling the truth the whole time." The story broke 3 days later. Dr. Webb held a press conference at Portland State University, presenting the evidence his team had gathered. The footprints, the photographs, the audio recordings, and my testimony delivered in detail about 3 months spent in the care of an unknown creature. This time, people listened. The response was massive. National news networks picked up the story. Researchers from around the country contacted Dr. Webb. Suddenly, I wasn't the crazy kid who thought he saw Bigfoot. I was the boy who survived with Bigfoot. The boy whose story had been validated by scientific evidence. But that validation came with a cost, because now everyone wanted to find the creature. Hunters, researchers, curiosity seekers, people with cameras and guns and dreams of fame. And I realized, with growing horror, what I'd done. I'd exposed the creature that saved my life, put a target on its back, brought hundreds of people into its territory, all looking for proof, all wanting their piece of the story. The creature had kept me alive for 93 days, and in return, I'd destroyed its anonymity, its safety, its chance to remain hidden from the world. What happened next would shock everyone, but it would devastate me most of all, because the creature wasn't hiding anymore, and the reason why would change everything. The invasion began within days of Dr. Webb's press conference. That's the only word for it, invasion. People descended on the Mount Hood area like locusts. Researchers with expensive equipment, documentary filmmakers with cameras, hunters with rifles, curious tourists with nothing better to do than tromp through the wilderness looking for a creature that had spent its entire life avoiding humans. The Forest Service tried to control it, but there was only so much they could do. The area where I'd been found wasn't in a designated wilderness area, so they couldn't legally bar access. They posted warnings about staying on marked trails, about not disturbing wildlife, but nobody listened. I watched it all unfold on the news with growing horror. Helicopter footage of dozens of people spread through the forest. Interviews with people claiming to have heard vocalizations, found footprints, caught glimpses of something massive moving through the trees. "This is my fault," I told Dr. Webb when he came to check on me 2 weeks after his press conference. I led everyone right to it. "You told the truth, Larry, that's never wrong. But the creature kept me alive, and now I've made it impossible for it to live in peace. How is that not wrong?" Dr. Webb didn't have a good answer for that. By March, there were so many reported sightings that it was impossible to know which ones were real. People were seeing what they wanted to see. Shadows became Bigfoot. Elk became Bigfoot. Even other hikers at a distance became Bigfoot. The signal was lost in the noise. And then, 3 weeks after Dr. Webb's press conference, something happened that made national news. A hunting party from Idaho, 3 men in their 30s who'd driven to Oregon specifically to find the creature, set up camp in the area where I'd been found. They had high-powered rifles, night vision equipment, and one of those big portable generators that were popular in 1981. On their third night there, March 15th, something destroyed their camp. The men weren't hurt. They'd been down by the stream when it happened. But when they got back, their tents were shredded, their equipment scattered across 100 yards of forest floor. The generator was smashed, its metal casing bent like it had been hit with a sledgehammer, and their rifles, all 3 of them, were gone. Simply gone, nowhere to be found. And there, in the soft earth around their destroyed campsite, were the footprints. Dozens of them, 18 inches long, deeply impressed into the ground, showing the force and weight behind them. The creature had sent a message. "Stay away. This is my territory. You are not welcome here." When I heard about it, I felt something unexpected, relief. The creature was defending itself, protecting its space. It was fighting back. But that relief turned to fear when I heard what happened next. The hunting party went to the media, showed photos of their destroyed camp, the footprints, the bent generator. And instead of being scared away, more people came. Trophy hunters who saw the creature as a challenge, thrill seekers who wanted to confront something dangerous, people who saw a destroyed campsite as proof that Bigfoot was real and aggressive and needed to be dealt with. "They're going to hurt it," I told my parents, "or it's going to hurt someone defending itself, and then they'll hunt it down." "What do you want to do?" Dad asked quietly. "I need to go back there. I don't know. Warn people to stay away. Try to protect it somehow. Larry, you're 12 years old. What can you possibly do? More than I'm doing sitting here watching this happen. Mom and Dad talked about it for hours. Finally, they agreed they'd drive me up there one more time. Not to lead people to the creature, but to try to keep people away from it. We went that Saturday, March 21st, 1981. Spring was beginning to show, early wildflowers, the forest greening up. But the beauty was marred by what we found: trash, cigarette butts, trampled vegetation, ribbons tied to trees as markers. The forest had been turned into a tourist destination, and it showed. We hiked to the area near where I'd spent so much time. The stream, the big fir tree, the rocky outcropping where we'd found the shelter. There were people everywhere, a group of college students with cameras, an older man with binoculars scanning the tree line, a woman reading from a book about tracking. "Excuse me," Dad said to the man with binoculars. "Do you have permission to be here? This isn't a public recreation area. It's national forest land. I have every right to be here." The man looked at me and recognition flickered across his face. "Hey, you're the kid, the one who was lost. Chapman, right?" "Yeah," I said. "You know where it is? The creature?" "I've been coming up here every weekend for a month. Haven't seen anything yet." "That's because it doesn't want to be seen. And you should leave. You're destroying its habitat." "Its habitat?" the man laughed. "Kid, if this thing is real, it needs to be studied, documented, maybe caught and—" "Caught?" My voice rose. "It's not some animal you can just cage up. It's intelligent. It saved my life." "Larry," Mom said quietly, putting a hand on my shoulder. We left the man and hiked deeper, away from the crowds. I led my parents to the exact spot where the creature used to sit across the stream from me, where we'd spent those quiet evenings just existing in each other's presence. The spot was trampled. Dozens of footprints, human footprints, in the mud. Candy wrappers caught in the bushes. Someone had even carved their initials into the bark of a nearby tree. I sat down on the ground and cried, just sat there and cried for what I'd destroyed. The creature had given me this place, had shared it with me, and I'd led a stampede of people right to it. "Larry," Dad said gently, "we should go. There's nothing we can do here. I can stay. I can wait. Maybe it will come and I don't know, apologize." "It's not coming, sweetie," Mom said, "not with all these people around." She was right. The creature was too smart to show itself now. It knew what humans were like when they wanted something. It had probably watched from a distance, seen the invasion, and retreated deeper into the wilderness. We started back toward where we'd parked the Bronco. The hike took about 40 minutes, and we were almost to the trailhead when I heard it, that sound, that low, resonant vocalization. I stopped dead. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Dad asked. It came again. Definitely the creature's call, coming from off-trail to the east, where the forest was thicker and fewer people had ventured. "It's calling to me," I said. "I have to go." "Absolutely not," Mom said immediately. "We're not letting you wander off into the forest again." "Mom, please. It saved my life. I owe it this much." Dad and Mom exchanged one of those parent looks that convey entire conversations. Finally, Dad nodded. "We're coming with you, and we're staying together. If anything seems dangerous, we leave immediately." We left the trail and pushed into the undergrowth. The vocalization came again, guiding us, leading us away from the populated areas into a section of forest that was older, darker, less disturbed. After maybe 15 minutes, we reached a small clearing, and there, standing at the far edge, was the creature. It looked the same as I remembered, 7.5 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur streaked with gray, those intelligent eyes fixed on us. "On me!" Mom gasped. Dad stopped moving entirely, his hand instinctively reaching for me protectively. "It's okay," I said quietly. "It's not going to hurt us." The creature made a sound, softer than the calls, almost conversational. Then it did something I'll never forget. It sat down, right there in the clearing, just sat down the way it used to by the stream. I took a step toward it. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know this would happen. I just wanted people to believe me, and now I've ruined everything for you." The creature tilted its head, watching me, listening. "All these people coming here, destroying your home, trying to find you, that's my fault. I should have kept quiet, should have protected your secret the way you protected me." I was crying again, the words tumbling out. "You saved my life. You fed me and kept me safe for 3 months, and I repaid you by telling the whole world you exist. I'm so sorry." The creature sat there for a long moment. Then it stood up and walked toward me. Mom made a frightened sound, but Dad held her back. It stopped about 10 feet away, closer than it had ever come during those 3 months. And then it did something extraordinary. It reached into the thick fur on its chest and pulled something out. A small object held between its massive fingers. It leaned forward and placed it on the ground, then stepped back. I approached cautiously and picked it up. It was my Casio watch, the digital watch I'd been wearing when I got lost, the one that had stopped working on day 6. "You kept it," I whispered. "All this time, you kept it." The creature made that soft sound again, then it pointed at me, then at itself, then made a gesture, spreading its arms wide, encompassing the forest around us. I understood. The watch was a gift, a connection, something to remember our time together. And the gesture meant, this is bigger than both of us now. What's done is done. We both have to adapt. "Will you be okay?" I asked. "With all these people?" The creature looked at me for a long moment. Then it turned and looked at the forest around us, the ancient trees, the dense undergrowth, the miles and miles of wilderness beyond. And I understood. This creature had survived in these mountains for decades, probably longer. It had avoided humans for its entire life. The current invasion was just another challenge to adapt to. It would survive. It would retreat deeper, be more careful, adjust its patterns. And eventually, when the novelty wore off and people stopped coming in such numbers, it would still be here. "Thank you," I said, "for everything, for keeping me alive, for teaching me, for being there when I needed someone, even if you were the last thing I expected." The creature looked at me one more time. Then it made a sound, that same mournful vocalization from the day I'd been rescued. Not sad, I realized now, just acknowledgement. Goodbye. It turned and walked into the forest, moving with that silent grace. Within seconds, it had disappeared completely, like it had never been there at all. I stood in the clearing, holding the watch, understanding that I'd never see it again. The rest of 1981 passed in a blur. The excitement about Bigfoot gradually faded. By summer, fewer people were hiking into the area. By fall, the news had moved on to other stories. Dr. Webb published a paper about his findings, and while it generated interest in academic circles, it didn't reignite the public frenzy. There were occasional reports over the years, hikers who heard strange sounds, campers who found large footprints, but nothing definitive, nothing that proved the creature was still there. I think it learned, became even more careful, even more secretive. The destruction of that hunting camp in March 1981 was probably the last time it ever directly confronted humans. After that, it just vanished into the deep wilderness. I grew up, went to high school, then college, became a teacher, got married, had 2 kids of my own. My life moved forward in all the normal ways, but I never forgot. I kept the Casio watch in a small wooden box on my dresser, looked at it often, a reminder of those 93 days, of the creature that saved me, of the price of truth. Jennifer and I are still close. She's a lawyer now, living in Seattle with her family. We talk about that summer sometimes, about how it changed everything for our family, how Dad became more open-minded, how Mom learned to trust my instincts, how we all learned that the world is stranger and more wonderful than we'd imagined. My parents are gone now. Dad passed in 2008, Mom in 2015. But before they did, they both told me They were glad I'd told the truth about the creature, even with all the complications that came from it. Dr. Webb retired in 1995 but continued his research until he passed away in 2010. We stayed in touch over the years. He never stopped believing, never stopped looking for evidence. His work helped make Bigfoot research more scientifically respectable, less of a joke. And the creature? I don't know. I'd like to think it's still out there, somewhere in those vast forests. Still surviving, still adapting, still being careful to remain unseen. I've gone back to that area a few times over the decades, hiked to the stream where we used to sit together. The forest has healed from the damage of 1981. The trees are taller, the undergrowth thicker. You'd never know hundreds of people once trampled through here looking for something impossible. I've never seen the creature again. Never heard that distinctive vocalization. But sometimes when I'm sitting by that stream in the quiet of an early morning, I feel watched. That same prickly sensation on the back of my neck that I felt 45 years ago. And I wonder if it's there, somewhere, in the shadows, remembering the scared 12-year-old boy it kept alive during one long summer. The boy who betrayed its trust by telling the world its secret. The boy who learned too late that some gifts are meant to remain private. I'm 57 years old now. It's 2025, and the world has changed in ways I couldn't have imagined in 1980. We have smartphones, internet, social media, cameras, everywhere. If I got lost in the woods today, I'd probably be found in hours, not months. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Glad I had those 93 days with a creature that shouldn't exist. Glad I learned what I learned about survival, about intelligence beyond human understanding, about the cost of seeking validation. My students sometimes ask if I regret telling the truth about what happened. They know my story. It's public record, documented, studied. The boy who was kept alive by Bigfoot. I tell them no, I don't regret it. Because the truth matters, even when it's complicated, even when it has consequences you didn't anticipate. But I also tell them this: some secrets are kept not because they're false, but because revealing them changes everything. And sometimes the most moral choice is to protect something precious by keeping it hidden, even if that means never getting credit for the truth you know. The creature saved my life. And then I exposed it to a world that wanted to capture it, study it, prove it existed. I thought I was honoring our connection by telling the truth, but maybe the real honor would have been keeping it secret. I'll never know if I made the right choice. All I know is that somewhere in the mountains of Oregon, there's a creature that kept a 12-year-old boy alive for 93 days. That showed kindness to someone who needed it desperately. That demonstrated intelligence, patience, and something close to compassion. And whether it's still out there or not, whether it survived the invasion I triggered or not, the lessons remain. Sometimes the most shocking thing isn't what happens to you. It's what happens because of what you do with what happened to you. And sometimes the creatures we meet in the wilderness teach us more about being human than any person ever could. That's my story. The truth of what happened in the summer of 1980 and the 45 years that followed, the boy who was kept alive by Bigfoot, and the man who learned to live with the consequences of telling that truth. I still have that Casio watch. I still remember every detail of those 93 days. And I still hope, somewhere in the deep wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, that the creature found peace after I destroyed its anonymity. Because it deserved peace, deserved to live its life undisturbed, deserved better than what I gave it in return for saving my life. That's what shocks me most, even now. Not that I survived, not that a Bigfoot kept me alive, but that in trying to honor that gift, I might have destroyed the very thing I wanted to celebrate. And there's no going back from that, no way to undo it, just the weight of knowing and the hope that somewhere out there, the creature understands I never meant to hurt it, that I was just a 12-year-old boy who wanted people to believe him. And I learned too late that some truths carry a price too high to pay. That's the real story. That's what happened next. And that's what will shock you if you really think about it. That the most dangerous thing in those woods wasn't the Bigfoot. It was me and what I did when I came back to civilization.